All right, ladies and gentlemen. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to do if I can fix this microphone, an audiobook reading of book 23 of the Odyssey. So um, if you're looking at homework for my class for English 9, and you can see this page that I have up in front of you here, we read book 22 as a class. 23 is your homework assignment, and along with that, there is the questions for both books. Okay, let's go ahead and jump in. So I'm going to click on this link. I already have it open right here, and it'll actually take you to book 22. Okay, so be aware of that. So there's a couple things that you can do to get around to book 23. You can either A, scroll to the bottom and click next book, and that'll take you right to 23. Or if you'd like to open it up and look at it the long way, you can click home right here, and it'll take you to the index for the entire book, so you can jump around. This is extremely useful for projects and for research and stuff like that. If you want to jump back specifically to the part with Scylla and Charybdis, you can do that by clicking here, or the games in Phaeacia with King Alcinous, they're over here. So I'm going to go ahead and do this as using this index. We talked about the archery contest in class. We talked about the slaughter in the palace, and now book 23, Odysseus and Penelope. So I'm going to click on that. And I'm just going to glance through it right here so that we can see. We have quite a few pictures, and I can tell you this chapter is going to have to deal with Odysseus and his wife coming back together finally after 10 years of war and fighting. So we'll go ahead and jump into it here. This is book 23. We're going to start here at the beginning. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. It says, "The old woman clambered upstairs, chuckling aloud as she went to tell her mistress her beloved husband was home." So again, this is the old woman, that's Euryclea, the nurse, going to tell Penelope. Her knees were working away, though she tottered as she went. She stood at the head of the bed and spoke to her lady, saying, "Penelope, dear child, wake up and see with your own eyes what you've longed for all this time. Odysseus is here. He is home after so many years, and he has killed all the proud suitors who plagued this house, wasted his sores, and bullied his son." Then wise Penelope woke. Remember, she's sleeping. Athena put her to sleep. And she answered, "My dear nurse, the gods who can make fools of the wisest and give insight to the simple-minded have crazed you and led your wits astray. You who were always so sensible, why do you mock me, whose heart is full of tears, with this mad tale? You woke me from sleep, sweet sleep that closed my eyelids and wrapped me round. Never have I slept so sound since Odysseus sailed to Ilium, the evil that it would be better not to name. Go downstairs, back to the servants' hall. If any other woman had woken me to tell me this, I'd have sent her back with a flea in her ear, but your old age spares you." "Dear child, I wouldn't mock you," faithful Euryclea replied. "It's true, Odysseus is here. He is home, just as I said. He's the stranger they all insulted in the hall. Telemachus knew long ago he was here, but managed to keep his father's plans hidden till he could revenge himself on those violent, arrogant men." At this, Penelope leapt from her bed in joy and threw her arms about the old woman with tears springing from her eyes. Then she spoke to her with winged words. "Dear nurse, come now, tell me truly, if it's really him, come as you say, how could he tackle the shameless suitors single-handedly, and with them always crowding the house in a pack?" "I couldn't see and didn't ask, but I heard the groans of dying men," loyal Euryclea replied. "We women sat there terror-stricken in the furthest depths of the thick-walled quarters, with the doors shut tight, until the moment when your son called me from the hall, as his father had told him. There I found Odysseus, standing over corpses lying piled around him on the solid floor. It would have gladdened your heart to see him, all spattered with blood and gore like a lion he was. Now the dead are heaped together in the courtyard palace, and he's had a great fire made, and is purifying our fine house. He sent me to call to you, so come with me now. Your hearts may rejoice together, you who have known such suffering. What you long desired has happened at last. He has come home alive to his own hearth to find you and his son here in his palace and his own house again. He has taken revenge on the suitors who did him harm." But cautious Penelope replied, "Dear nurse, don't exult over them so soon. How welcome the sight of Odysseus would be here to everyone, above all to me and our son, you know. But this tale must be false. Surely one of the gods has killed the noble suitors in anger, enraged by the depths of their insolence and wickedness. They showed respect to never a man on this earth, whether they were met with good or evil. So now they have suffered for their own foolish excess. Odysseus, though, has lost his life far away, and with it the chance of coming home. My child, she replied, what are you saying? That your husband will never return when he's here at your own hearth? You never believe a thing. Well, let me tell you of something else that proves it. The scar from the wound the wild boar's tusk, the white tusk gave him long ago, I saw it when I washed his feet, and I wanted to tell you that, but he clasped his hand over my mouth and refused to let me speak. Come with me now, I'll stake my life on it, and if I lie, deal me a cruel death. Dear nurse, cautious Penelope replied, wise though you are, you cannot fathom the minds of the immortal gods, but let us go to my son, so I can see the bodies of the suitors and the men who killed them. So this is kind of heartbreaking because Odysseus finally comes home and the nurse goes to get his wife Penelope, but she doesn't believe it. She's gone for so long without her husband that it hurts to even think that he might be coming home, and that might not be true. Like she's heartbroken by this. But Eurycleus says, hey, earlier when he was pretending to be a beggar, I washed his feet and I saw the scar that the white tusk that the boar gave him when he fought it long ago. I know it's him, right? He revealed himself to me. But Penelope still doesn't believe it. The next section, Penelope's uncertainty, will continue. So saying, she left her room and went downstairs, considering whether to remain distant and to question the man who was said to be her dear husband, or whether to approach him, clasp his hands, head and hands, and kiss him. But when she crossed the stone sill, she sat down by the far well in the firelight opposite Odysseus, where he sat by a tall pillar, his eye on the ground, waiting to see if his wife would speak as she looked at him. She sat there silently for a long time, wondering, gazing intently at his face, often failing to recognize this man dressed in foul rags. Then it was Telemachus spoke his criticism of her behavior. My mother, unmotherly and hard-hearted, why do you distance yourself from my father like this, instead of sitting by his side and plying him with questions? No other woman would steel her heart like this and sit apart from a husband who had just returned to her to his native land after 20 years of bitter toil. But your heart is always harder than flint. My child, Penelope answered, my mind is lost in wonder, and I feel powerless to speak and question him, or even look at his long face. But if it's really Odysseus come home, we too have a better way of recognizing one another, because there are secret tokens that only the two of us know. And noble long-suffering Odysseus smiled at this and spoke to Telemachus with winged words. Telemachus, leave your mother to put me to the proof. In this, her house, she will soon be enlightened. For now, since I'm covered in dust and dressed in rags, she thinks me unworthy, and I won't concede that I am Odysseus. But let's consider what to do for the best. Whatever the country, whoever kills even a single man of one of the dead leaves few behind to avenge him must go into exile, abandoning his native land and kin, while we have killed the noblest youth of Ithaca, the core of its defiance. Take thought of that. So be aware here too, he just was talking about the fact that he just killed all of the noble youth of Ithaca, right? That's going to be a problem because he killed all the sons of all the important people in the land. He knows there's going to be consequences. So he tells Telemachus, hey, be ready, because they might retaliate. He continues here. Telemachus replies, that is, do you take thought, dear father, since they say you are the most resourceful of men, a mortal without equal, we are eager to follow you, and I know we won't fail to support you to the best of our powers. Resourceful Odysseus answered him, saying, then I'll tell you the plan that seems best to me. Bathe first and dress and order the palace servants to choose fresh clothes. Then let the divine minstrel play us a lively dance on his sweet-toned lyre, so that anyone outside who hears the neighbors or passers-by will take it for a marriage feast. That way, there will be no rumor of the suitor's death put abroad in town before we can reach the densely wooded farm. Once there, we can plan to take advantage of whatever the Olympians send us. So they're going to make a plan to pretend there's a marriage, to pretend that Penelope married someone, right? And that's going to solve the problem. And they're just going to try to run away from the problem that is all of the suitors being dead. Then we come to a really big section here, known as the marriage bed section. And this part is where Penelope is going to test Odysseus to make sure that he really is who he says he is, right? And it has to do with their room. They listened readily to his order and obeyed. The men bathed and dressed, while the women adorned themselves. The divine minstrel took up his sounding lyre and stirred the desire for sweet music and pleasant dance. The great hall echoed to the footsteps of dancing men and elegantly dressed women, and hearing the noise outside, passers-by said, "Ah, surely someone has married our much-wooed queen." She was too hard-hearted to tend her husband's great palace in the end, in hopes of his return. So they talked, not knowing what was really happening. Meanwhile, the housekeeper, Eurynome, bathed the great-hearted Odysseus there in the house, rubbed him with oil, and dressed him in a fine tunic and cloth. Athena then clothed him in beauty, making him seem taller and stronger, making the locks of his hair spring up thickly like hyacinth petals. As a clever craftsman, taught his art by Hephaestus and Pallas Athene, overlays silver and gold to produce a graceful finish, so the goddess graced his head and shoulders. He looked like a man. He left the bath looking like an immortal. Then he returned to the chair opposite his wife and spoke to her. So again, notice Athena always intervening. She comes in and she makes him look more buff, even taller. She makes his appearance just look more attractive, and she cleans him up a bit, and he looks like a god. Then he says to her, "Lady," he says to Penelope, "Lady, you must have been touched by the Olympian gods. They gave you a harder heart than any other woman, one that nothing could soften. No other woman would steal her heart like this and sit apart from her husband who has just returned to her and his native land after 20 years of bitter toil. Come, Euryclea, make me a bed to sleep in alone, since my wife's heart is as hard as iron." And cautious Penelope answered. She answers him saying, "Sir, you must have been touched by those same gods. I am not proud and scornful of you, nor am I confused. I know well how you looked when you said you sailed from Ithaca in your long-oared ship. Come then, Euryclea, and have the great bed dragged from the final bridal chamber he built himself, and cover it with rugs and fleeces and brightly colored blankets." So there is a test that's happening here. I'll give you some background. Now, Odysseus's bed, him and Penelope's bed, Odysseus made it by hand, and it's not just any kind of bed. He didn't just make it out of random pieces of wood and put it together. No, it is literally a tree growing out of the ground. It's a tree that has been cut off and is flat, right? So it's a tree stump. So it's not like you could just move it, right? But Odysseus made it. He's the only one who would really know what actually it is. And as you would know, you cannot move it, right? It's literally a part of the earth. And that's important here. These are the words to test her husband. But Odysseus, angered, rounded on his loyal wife, "Lady, those are truly bitter words you speak. Who's moved my bed? That would be hard, even with the greatest skill, unless perhaps some god arrived who could easily set it down somewhere else. But no mortal man alive, however young or strong, could easily shift it from its place, since a great secret went into its making, and it was my work and mine alone. A long-leafed olive tree, strong and vigorous, and thick as a pillar, grew in the courtyard. I built my room of solid stone around it, finished off with a fine roof and adding a tight-fitting timber door. I trimmed the trunk from the roots up, after cutting off the long-leaved olive branches, smoothed it skillfully and well, and trued it to the line. That was my bedpost. I drilled the holes with the auger, and with this for its beginning, fitted all the smooth timbers of my bed until it was complete. I inlaid it with ivory, silver, gold, and stretched shining purple straps of oxhide across it. That was its secret, as I say. But, lady, I no longer know if the bed I made is still in place. Perhaps some man has chopped through the olive trunk and shifted it somewhere else." So she tests him. She says, "Okay, you know what? I'll say you're Odysseus if you can move the bed in our bedroom," right? She knows full well that only Odysseus would know what the bed is actually. So Odysseus, he says, "How could you doubt me? I actually know that this bed is one that I made. I built my entire room around it. It's a tree." And at this point, we can see the next subheading title, Penelope is convinced, right? This is obviously enough intimate knowledge that Odysseus has to make her convinced that this actually is him. Let's read this. As he spoke, revealing the unchanged truth, she knew her knees gave way and her heart melted. Bursting into tears, she ran to Odysseus, flung her arms about his neck, and kissed his face, crying, "Odysseus, don't be angry with me. You who in everything were always the most understanding of men. Our sorrows came from the gods who begrudged our enjoying our youth and reaching old age together. Don't be angry or upset because I didn't give you this welcome the moment I saw you. My heart was always full of fear that some man would come and cheat me with words. Many men are only out for profit. Helen of Argos, Zeus's daughter, would have never slept with a stranger from abroad if she'd known the warrior sons of Achaia would come to fetch her home. A god it was truly that drove her to commit the act of shame. Then, only then, did she contemplate the fatal madness that brought us to such sorrow. Now, you have told me the true secret of our marriage bed that no other mortal knew but you and I and a single maid servant, actress, who was my father's gift before I came to you, and guarded the door of our final bridal chamber. Now you convince my stubborn heart. Right, so notice what this is, right? It's only through a knowledge of the intimate relationship between the two of them, right? It's only because Odysseus has a knowledge that only they as a couple have that he's able to convince her that he in fact is Odysseus. And notice she's also very fearful of men in this time, right? She says many men are out for profit, right? They are liars and cheaters, and that's a problem. So she's extremely cautious about people that might pretend to be Odysseus. But she said, now you've convinced my stubborn heart. Her words stirred his heart to a greater longing for tears, and he wept, clasping his beloved loyal arms in his wife. As a welcome at the sight of the land of few surviving sailors who swim to shore, escaping the gray breakers when their solid vessel, driven over the sea by wind and towering waves, has been shattered by Poseidon, who, saved from drowning, are overjoyed when the brine-caked bodies touch the land. Welcomed as that was the sight of their husband, Penelope gazed at him, never unwinding her white arms from round his neck. And so we have some of these pictures of their embrace, and then finally, realizing who is in front of them, right? Then dawn rises, so it's the next day now. If bright-eyed goddess Athena had not thought otherwise, she held back the long night at its ending, and golden-throned dawn by the ocean's stream, not letting her yoke the swift-hoofed horses Lampus and Phantheon, the colts that drew her chariot, bringing light to men. So notice this happens at night, so it's been a very long day, right? There's been a lot of fighting, there's been a lot of arguing, there's been a lot of testing and guile and cunning. There's a lot of stuff that's happened, and this happens at night when Odysseus and Penelope recognize one another and come back to each other at the end here. And as a way of validating that, notice Athena literally prolongs the nighttime. She delays morning so that Odysseus and Penelope can finally have a moment, right, before the next day has to start and they have to go clean up and do a bunch of different things. So she literally delays the morning. Next comes the prophecy. So we talked about the prophecy when we read, I think it was book 11. This is when Odysseus goes to the underworld. He goes to the underworld and he meets a man by the name of Tiresias. And Tiresias is a blind prophet. And Tiresias tells him, Odysseus, if you mess with the cattle of Helios, you will never make it home. And if you do happen to make it home, the gods will destroy your life, right? You can't do that, right? Unless you make some kind of sacrifice to Poseidon and apologize and recognize that he is more powerful than you. You need to humble yourself. You will always be plagued by the gods, right? If you try to be more powerful than them, they're going to smite you and make your life miserable. So right here, we have Odysseus who's recounting Tiresias' prophecy. So Odysseus says this to his wife. He says, dear wife, we have not yet reached the end of our troubles. I have still had a long labor to perform before I reach my end. Or so the spirit of Tiresias prophesied when I descended to Hades' house, and to ask how my comrades and I might return home. But come now to bed, wife, so we may delight in rest, soothed by sweet sleep. Your bed is ready for you whenever you wish, wise Penelope answered. Now the gods have brought you home to your own country and this fine house. But since a god has put the thought in your mind, tell me about this fresh trial, since I'll only learn of it later, and it is better to know now. Odysseus says, lady, the gods have touched your mind. Why be so eager to know? Still, I will tell you, hiding nothing, though your heart will gain no pleasure from it, and nor does mine. Tiresias told me that to travel through the many cities of men, carry a shapely oar till I come to a race that knows nothing of the sea, that eat no salt with their food, and have never heard of crimson-painted ships or the well-shaped oars that serve as wings. And he gave me this as a sign, and one I could not miss, and now I tell it to you. When I meet another traveler who says that I carry a winnowing fan on my broad shoulder, There I must plant my shapely oar in the ground and make a rich sacrifice to Lord Poseidon, a ram, a bull, and a breeding boar. Then leave for home and make the sacred offerings to the deathless gods who hold the wide heavens, to all of them in their due order. And death will come to me far from the sea, the gentlest of death, taking me when I am bowed with comfortable old age, and my people prosper about me. All this, he said, would come true. Notice Odysseus basically says here, if we want to live out the rest of our life comfortably, if death will eventually take us, but I would rather have death take me when I'm old and comfortable and I've had a full life and I have my countrymen and I am back in my home. If that's to happen, I need to go make a sacrifice to Lord Poseidon. He says, I need to sacrifice a ram, a bull, and a boar, right? And then this will be able to happen, but only then. Penelope responds, she says, if the gods really intend a more pleasant old age for you, there is hope that will set an end to all your troubles. So they conversed. As they spoke, Eurynome and the nurse made their bed with soft bedclothes by the light of a blazing torch. When the two servants had fussed over the coverings of the great bed, the old nurse returned to her room to sleep, and Eurynome, the chambermaid, lit them on their way and took her leave of them in the bridal chamber. Joyfully, they reenacted the rites of their own familiar bed, and Telemachus and the cowherd and the swineherd, still in their dancing feet, dismissed the women and lay down themselves to sleep in the darkened hall. So by the end of this bit right here, we have the full reconciliation, the full coming back together, right? So the circle has been closed, and now Odysseus is almost done with his journey, right? We talked about the hero's journey. We're almost all the way across it, right? There's only one more thing to do before Odysseus can go back home. Everything is normal. And let's keep going here. Odysseus tells Penelope his tale. When Odysseus and Penelope had their fill of love's joy, they took comfort in telling each other their tale. The lovely queen told him all she had suffered at home, watching the detestable crowd of suitors who on her account slaughtered many cattle and fat sheep and emptied whole jars of wine. And Odysseus, scion of Zeus, told her all the pains he had endured in his labor, and all the pains he had inflicted on men, and she loved to hear it all. And when sweet sleep failed to drown her eyelids until the tale was done. Let's see. We're going to skip over a bit here. This is just recap, right? So this is all stuff that we've actually read. In fact, if we look at it here, first he tells her of the Cyclones and the lotus eaters, right? That should sound familiar. He talks about what the Cyclops were like and how he fought and bested the Cyclops, even if he did kind of screw it up there at the end. He talks about Circe, and he talks about the house of Hades. He talks about Tiresias, the blind prophet. He talks about the mountains and Scylla and Charybdis, and then coming to the land of Helios, the sun god, and how they ate the cattle when they weren't supposed to, and how everyone died except for Odysseus. He talks about Ogygia and being stuck on Calypso's island for so long. He talks about going to the Phaeacians' land and talking to King Alcinous, like all of these things that he did, these amazing travels. He's got 10 years of time to catch her up on, right? So he tells her all of these things. Then it says, now another thought occurred to the goddess bright-eyed Athena when she considered Odysseus had enough fill of his heart with the joys of love and sleep in his wife's arms. She roused the gold-throned dawn of ocean stream to bring light to the world. So Athena literally, when she decides that Odysseus has rested enough, then she lets morning come, right? Then she brings the light back into the world. So literally this world's nature bends to the will of what Odysseus needs. Then he rose from his soft bed and gave his wife orders, saying, wife, we've had enough of trouble, you and I, weeping here over many sufferings caused by my long journey home, and I caught in the net of sorrow and the other gods far from my own country and long to return. But now we're back together in our own wished-for bed, and you must take care of my wealth here in the palace, while I seize the flocks to replace those the suitors consumed. And the Achaeans will give me rest till the folds are full. I must now go to our wooded farm to find my good father, who is suffering because of me. And I ask this of you, dear wife, knowing your wisdom. When the sun is up, rumors of the suitors' deaths in the palace will be rife. So you go to your room upstairs with your maids and stay there. Don't see anyone and ask no questions. So saying, he clad his shoulders with fine armor and roused Telemachus and the swineherd and the cowherd and told them to take their weapons with them. They obeyed, donning their armor, and the doors opened, and they followed Odysseus outside. Light flooded the earth, but Athena hid them in darkness and soon led them clear of the town. So remember, everyone's going to be super mad because all of the suitors were just killed. And again, those are the important people in this city, in this island. So Odysseus says, okay, Penelope, you go upstairs and you stay there until I come back. You don't talk to anyone. Don't answer any questions. Don't do anything, right? Because I don't want people to be upset and blame this on you. Then he takes his son and the two people that help him, the cowherd and the swineherd, and he says, let's go. We need to go find my father. But notice when they do that, even Athena shrouds them in darkness so that nobody can see them and or be mean to them because of what they've done. And that's where the chapter ends, right? That's where the book ends. They're going to look for his father. They're also going to make a sacrifice to Poseidon. And then beyond that, there also needs to be one more thing that clicks into place before this story can be entirely done. And that is the parents of all the suitors who get angry. In the next chapter, we're going to see they get very angry and want to confront Odysseus. And then he has one more final problem to solve because there is one more book left in the Odyssey for us to read. And we'll cover that when we come back to class, probably on Monday. If you'd like to finish it off over the weekend, go for it. The ending is ridiculous. It is one of the craziest endings, and I don't necessarily mean that in a good way. We'll talk about it. I'll give you some old school Latin terms, and it'll be great. All right.